What did the Babe, the Beatles, and Bill Murray have to do with baseball and softball in Erie, Pennsylvania? What are Erie's most memorable baseball and softball stories? Who were and who are the successful stars behind the region's amateur and professional teams? That is what we'll discuss here in conversation with Alan Swigonski, the author of Erie Baseball and Softball 360. We're looking at On Deck, our program here with him. We're going to take that 360 view of the playing field and the people featured in the pages of the recently published book. Hello and welcome to the Jefferson Educational Society's digital programming. I'm Ben Speggen, and I'm the vice president at the JES, and I'm a contributing editor at the Erie Reader. Alongside me is my JES colleague and friend, Mr. Pat Cuneo, the publications coordinator at the JES, who spent decades covering not just news, but sports in the pages of the Erie Times News. And he's the author. He authored the foreword of Erie Baseball and Softball 360. Before we get to a fuller introduction of our presenter and his presentation, we've got a great slide deck to take a look at. A few programmatic reminders. Since this program is first airing live on the JES Facebook page, we're going to work our way through as many questions from you, the viewers, as we can as we host this event. If you have a question, just leave it in the comments section below. If you're listening to or watching a later broadcast of this program, still feel free to send us your questions and we'll keep this conversation going. We appreciate your engagement. And of course, for more information about upcoming Jefferson Educational Society programs and publications, do visit our website, jeserie.org. Be sure to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Here, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Mr. Pat Cuneo, to introduce our guest author, Alan Swigonski. Pat, over to you.
Thanks, Ben. Alan is a lifelong Erie resident. He grew up in a neighborhood on the Lower East Side where he points out that there was a bar on every corner and a church on every other corner, and every patch of grass or gravel in between was a good place to play ball. That's so well put. There's no one who could be a better author of this book than Alan, a great baseball fan. Many in Erie came to know him through his work with Team Erie, who's the co-founder with my brother Kevin Cuneo of an effort to save minor league baseball in Erie that led to the construction of Jerriott Park, which is now UPMC Field. So he's played a really important role in Erie's baseball scene, but this book is unique in that it comes from the heart and from his own roots. He graduated from Holy Family grade school, went to Cathedral Prep, and again, and first studying for his bachelor's in business and later a master's degree in public administration. When not at the ballpark, Al could be found working at GTE, Zern Industries, Uric Foundry, Ameridrives International, and Gannon. When not working, also, he was glad to be going about life as he still is with his lovely wife, Linda, and their children, Andrew and Jessica, to whom he dedicated this book. It's my pleasure to welcome my friend and a great Erie sportsman, Al Swigonski. Al, I know you've got a slide deck here that Ben's going to be operating too. Can you take it from there?
Sure. Yeah, the whole concept for the book was to capture some stories that are personal to the people involved, but then also, as much as I could, to ask them to open up their scrapbooks and share some photos. So the whole concept of the book was to make it as viewable as possible. So I was very, very grateful for people that are willing to share a lot of personal items. I think the first one you have lined up here is one of my very favorites. I had played softball on a team with a friend of mine, Andy Kravonik, and his father, Andy Sr., coached that team. And he was a very, very good hitter, a very good softball player in his own right back in the day. It turns out that he had met Andy's mom, his future wife, on a softball field. There was a ball club in the 40s of women, and the name of the team was the Erie Skippers. And you see the uniform right there on the screen, along with the glove that was used by Audrey Alice Kravonik as a very good ball player in her own right. So when I had visited with Andy Jr. and started to reminisce a little bit about our ball playing together, and then talking about his mom and his dad. What a great story. It's probably one of my favorite stories in the entire project. And the way they met was with him helping the coach and her as a player. She had caught his eye, not just as a player, but in other ways as well. And it was wedding bells in the future, and some very good ball in between.
That's great. Well, let me ask you about the cravatics for a second. It just so happened I played American Legion baseball for the older Andy, and played with Andy and his brother. Who these guys were great athletes. I was a charity case. Tell us one of the great tips Andy Senior had passed on to me was, when you're running in the outfield, run on your toes, and the whole world doesn't look like it's going up and down and having an earthquake.
Yeah.
Your steering memories from your own childhood. Tell us, Al, what was it like growing up on the east side and seeing all these ball games?
Oh, it was great. I lived only a block away from the fields at 11th and Hess. So we would watch all the city rec games and other ball games as much as we could. Every Tuesday and Thursday night was circled on our calendars for all the spring and summer games, well into the fall, certainly for the big tournaments that would be held on the holidays. In between, if we weren't going about some chores or doing schoolwork, we'd be at that ball field from sun up until we heard our dad whistle. And you could hear his whistle a block away.
Alan,
it was great.
Alan, I want to jump in here because I always like to ask authors, when did you know? And here being, when did you know you had a book? You know, when you were reminiscing and you were starting to unpack some of these stories and you thought, wow, light bulb goes off. I've got the idea for a book. When did that happen for you?
It was gradual. Throughout my professional career, I still followed baseball and softball, and used to love reminiscing with my old friends that I either admired playing ball or played with. And I always felt that their stories would be just great to collect in writing. I would hate to see some of these stories lost and not shared with people, just to have it recorded. So it wasn't hard for me to envision putting something together in writing. The question was, once I had the time, I was able to then act on it, and then see if I could develop enough of my skills to do a decent job at it. So that took a while. I had to convince myself first.
Well, how long did that take, start to finish? Because I think sometimes we think somebody just has the idea, they sit down and they write the book, and boom, it comes out, and next thing you know, we're looking for places to buy it, and we want to read it, and we want to devour it. How long, start to finish, did this take you to do, Alan?
Yeah, it was over 3 years, almost 3.5 years. Part of that is once I had to retire from my job earlier than I had planned due to illness. And I'm not the type of person to just sit around, and I felt that there'd be some therapeutic value to actually working on a project. And so that's when I started taking these old ideas of mine and started reaching out to people and doing some research. But there were a lot of stops and starts in between. The very first person I reached out to was John Trisilla, because his father-in-law, Jerry Utt, was one of my heroes back from the Team Erie days, as well as his own baseball playing days. And I felt that if I was going to start a project, I'd really like to start there. And so I remember telling Mr. Utt when I visited him at his home in the fall of 2017 that you have the dubious honor of being the first person to be interviewed. It also means you'll have to wait the longest to see the results, which was true in many cases. But right then, off and running with the type of response I got from John Tresilla and from Jerry, their feedback, as well as some of the other early people I interviewed, told me that I was indeed on the right path, and I was determined to do justice by their stories.
On the subject of Jerry, like, what kind of ball player was he? I know he was accomplished, but what do you think his career was?
Well, if it wasn't for injury, he would have been a major leaguer. He was he played in the pros in the Indian system. Sorry, first baseman, very good bat, good hitter, good fielder. He would have really been somebody that would be a household name in the major leagues if circumstances hadn't prevented. That's true in some cases of other people I interviewed, but just to reach the apex of playing in professional baseball, he was certainly a hero of mine. Not just from sports, but also just in the way that he conducts himself as a person, as a businessman. I always admired Mr. Ut and very, very successful career.
And you mentioned Judge Tresilla. He was a heck of a baseball player himself.
Yeah, he ended up playing at Dayton.
Yeah. Yeah, tell us about that. He's got some great stories from playing in the Dayton field.
Oh yeah, absolutely. John is a real athlete, not just a baseball player. A great guy, of course, but the thing with him is he was able to play at prep and then at Dayton on scholarship, and then he's one of these guys that'll do the triathlons and you name it, whatever he can do to test himself. Shows, you know, a lot of times these folks show the character on the field that actually translates well into professional life and personal life. And John is certainly one of those, just like Mr. Rudd.
So we've been fortunate a few times to have Judge Tresilla present to our Civic Leadership Academy, and a couple of times he's made mention that he grew up playing t-ball and some little league with the likes of other Erie familiar names like Tim Nicastro of Erie Insurance or Andre Horton on County Council,
Yeah.
And so from that, as somebody who's a non-Erie native, and I grew up in a rather rural part of Pennsylvania, but baseball was an important part of bringing us together in the summers, and then for competitive play, and then for travel leagues. And I thought about the networks that we had formed and how that worked for us. But I think I started to see the real network building of how Erie guys and Erie men and women got to know each other and build early relationships through sports. Can you speak to that a little bit, Alan?
Yeah, that was the most common thing that happened in the early interviews, starting with people like John and Mr. Ut, and also Bruce Bauman is a favorite of mine, Randy Martin, Bob Cito. These guys not just had good information about their backgrounds and their own personal recollections, but right off the bat, it was, boy, who you got to talk to. You got to talk to Stan Brzezicki first, and then you got to talk to Pete Freed or Buzz Brandon. I would look these guys up based on those type of conversations. And that was the thing that was most rewarding. Wasn't just the reactions from people I was interviewing or getting to know. A lot of these folks I had not met, but admired from a distance. But to have them instantly say, boy, who you got to talk to. Once that happens as frequently as it was a signpost that I was on the right path for success. And that never failed me. My goodness, if I called somebody and said, well, so-and-so said I should talk to you, boy, I was invited into many living rooms and kitchens, or in the latter stages, we did a lot, through other forms of communication due to the circumstances. But that was the most common response I got from the interviews was, boy, who you got to talk to. And that was a multiplier effect.
I'm sorry.
Pat, over to you.
A lot of the terrific baseball players went on to play fast pitch softball and also slow pitch and modified. But the true greats that made that transition not easy. Tell us about that atmosphere, the special 11th and Hess, 12th and Hess, Ronick Field, Brucher Field. What it was like going as a fan, as a participant. It just seemed to be unique.
That was awesome. I mean, that was my neighborhood, and I loved those game nights with the lights on, and just these players were like stars to me. And watching, especially the pitchers, I was amazed at how well they performed, and all these athletes. I admired the hitters as well, but it was amazing. The the crowd was actually sometimes around the outfield fence, standing room only with, 4 or 5 people deep trying to get a good perch to watch the game from. It was remarkable. It was quite a buzz. It felt like pro ball to me. Uh, the It was actually a story that I tell in the book has to do with my very first efforts into making money was after one of the big holiday tournaments sponsored by the Baumans that a friend of mine, Donnie Simonowski, and I would go through the garbage and under the stands and pick up any loose pop bottles that we could turn into the corner grocery store for deposit change. And we were up to our knees in baseball cards and potato chips and Coke. So that was my first venture into capitalism, but that also kind of suggests how popular these tournaments were, that it would attract that much people to create that much of an opportunity. It was awesome. Very fond memories of those nights. And my mother was always more forgiving if we were up a little later on game nights because she knew where we were.
That is always Tuesdays and Tuesdays, Thursdays?
Yeah, Tuesdays and Thursdays for City Rec, and then every other day of the week for industrial league and church leagues and you name it.
Wow. Well, tell us about some of those pictures. Oh, well, here, I don't want to, I can't stop the Babe here. You have a great story retelling Babe's visit to Erie.
Yeah, I was very happy in my research, one of the places I spent a lot of time was the Heritage Room at the Erie County Library, which is something I recommend for anybody. It's a great way to spend an afternoon just on any topic of interest. There's a wealth of material. And for somebody like myself who is researching baseball and softball, whether it's going through old newspaper clippings or some of the books that are available, what a wealth of information and very helpful staff as well. I found a book that was published by the Erie Daily Times, back in the 90s, I think. And it had to do with some of the sports heroes of the Erie area. And in there, I found an article that was original from the day after a barnstorming team led by Babe Ruth had appeared at Ainsworth Field. At that time, it was Athletic Field, competing against the local Moose Club, who was the best baseball team in Erie at the time. And what a show he put on. From the accounts of the newspaper article, it adds clarity to the whole story about him and his home run over Roosevelt. The way it's actually I had heard all kind of things, that he hit one over the roof or hit the chimney or hit one into the chimney. And after hearing so many stories, you wondered, what really happened. And as it turns out, he did hit a homer during the exhibition game, but especially during batting practice, he put on quite a show, and he launched more than a few over Roosevelt School. So it was a delight for the fans. He was mobbed by the kids after the game, and very memorable event. And I was very, very pleased to find that original account in the library.
And Alan, I think that's one of the really fun elements of the book is that you blend both the local stories as with some of the celebrity stories. And I teased that out in the intro for this program, and that the Babe's not the only one. We also see the Beatles having a connection here. So tell us about that.
Yeah, this was one of my favorites too. I got this with permission from the Paul Youghlin family. Paul's on the left there. As the story goes, back in the early 60s, right at the time the Beatles were starting to make inroads into the US as part of the British invasion, when the Beatles were there to film the Ed Sullivan show, well, naturally they would want to stop at the biggest hotspots in New York City. And at that time, the Peppermint Lounge was the place to be. And at that time, the Epics was the name of the band before they were the Younger Brothers. I believe they had to change the name because of conflict with another record label name. And so the Epics at that time were the house band at the Peppermint Lounge. It started out as a 1 week gig and it turned into a 3-year stay as the house band. So they were very popular. They did a spoof on the Beatles, including glasses and fake wigs, and did it upright. And they had a couple of fans there. You see Paul McCartney with one of the wigs, and to the right you see John Lennon there hamming it up for the camera as well. Just a wonderful moment in time. The sports connection is that Paul Yoklin, after a wonderful career in music with the Younger Brothers, was a fixture on the baseball diamond as a coach at several schools, including East High and Villa, and later on at Mercier's Prep, where his love of the game was translated very effectively to the students that played under him and the coaches that would have worked with him as well. But yeah, there it is. There's an Erie and baseball connection with the Fab Four.
And not to get stuck on celebrities, I want to go back to Pat because he was about to ask you about some pictures. And again, I think that's one of the great things about the book is the blending of the stories and being able to pack so much into an accessible book. So Pat, I want to go back to you because I don't want to steamroll over that question you had about pictures.
Well, I was just I thought it was remarkable in the book how you had a command of the greatest fast pitch pitchers in Erie, but what really set it apart was you made the connection to the younger crowd, the Hill House brothers, who learned from some of the greats. And tell us about that.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, Hugh and Bill Hillhouse were great players, and they were a little bit after the time when I was a fixture at the field watching games. But I always admired the fact that they helped keep the game, the whole city rec thing going with being the stars at the time. Excuse me. With Bill especially, he ended up playing internationally and representing not just the USA, but Erie as well. And so I like to talk about some of the pitchers I admired, whether it was Bob Kenny or Stan Brzezicki. Also in terms of people like the Hillhouse brothers, who actually, as kids, one time they were just playing a game of catch and practicing their windmill pitching styles when none other than Stan Brzezicki saw them practicing and stopped what he was doing and spent quite a bit of time with the kids and showing them how he pitched. And he was able to pass it on very directly, and that was very meaningful to the boys. So what a great way to learn. And that was passed on. People like Bob Kenny were so generous with their time, not just putting on clinics, but making themselves available to people that were interested in pitching. And that translated to the ladies as well. There's a story in the book that I write about Greg Evans and his daughters, that the story's entitled West County to West Point. They started off in West County at Northwestern High School in Albion, and the girls ended up pitching so well they were on the team at Army together, and so there's the West Point connection. And Bob Kenny was one of the people that was helpful in working with the young ladies. Keep in mind, I mean, they really worked at it too. My goodness, each girl would have thrown 1,000 pitches a week as part of the program with their dad. And that meant that Greg was catching 2,000 a week. And so it was a labor of love for them. And that's a common theme throughout all the stories, is dedication and that love of the game that comes across. Perfect.
You mentioned Kenny. Was he the best pitcher in Erie history, you think?
In my opinion, yeah, there's many other very good ones. So that I'm open for argument there. I admired Dick Merriman and Brian Tootin as well. Chris Soltowski, my goodness, there's so many. Tommy Strohs. I hate to leave people out.
You know,
But
it's funny, they're different generations, obviously.
yeah,
But Billy Hillhouse, man, he was tough. I couldn't get
world class.
yeah, world class, and learn from so many local greats. I'm interrupting this great photo here. Tell us about that.
Oh yeah, I love this one. Rick Federichi was one of Erie's best athletes, not just baseball or softball. He was a basketball star at Strong Vincent and then at Edinburgh. He was a fantastic baseball player drafted by the Pittsburgh Pirates and spent several seasons in the pros in their system, playing across from guys like Omar Marino and Kent Tekulve and Dave Parker, and holding his own. When his career ended in minor league baseball, he tried Glenwood League and found that to be a bit easy compared to the pros. So he ended up playing fast pitch softball, which he found challenging, but turned into one of the best hitters we've ever seen. He also would be a fixture at ball games at Jerry Park, and that's where he had first met his future wife, Faith. The photo here is actually capturing the moment where he proposed to her at the same spot where they first met at the ballpark. She said yes.
Well, I guess the question is, who took that photo?
I think somebody in the family got a hint. I was grateful for Rick and Faith to share that with me. It's one of the lovelier photos in the book. Very special.
And not to get caught up there, but if I didn't finish my celebrity trifecta from the intro, I wanted to make sure, because we had already worked in the Babe, we had worked in the Beatles, the third B here, the triple B, Bill Murray. And so I want to take us back to the celebrity element for a bit, then we'll go see some more photos from locals as well. But Bill Murray visits Erie.
Yeah. Hey, remind me, there's another B too. Dave Barry was somebody that I write about in the book as well, and his visit to Erie. And remind me later, we'll talk about that. But Bill Murray's a favorite. Oh my gosh. I was at work when I got the call that he was there at Ainsworth Field. I should run down there and have the chance to meet him. And I was just bogged down at work. I couldn't make it. So I had to live vicariously through my friends that were there. One of the people that had become friends with him was Mike Gallagher, a popular media fixture in Erie. And Mike used to send game film of the Erie Sailors to Bill Murray, who at that time was a part owner with Marvin Goldklang of the Erie Ball Club. It was a limited amount of time, but he really embraced it. And the time when he visited his investment in Erie, Mike was able to get his signature on a jersey as a souvenir. It's wonderful. The way Bill Murray signed it was tuck in here. There's a dotted line in the lower right-hand corner, and then he signed it. Just vintage Bill Murray. I was very grateful for Mike to share this with me as well, so I could put it in the book and tell that story.
And Bill Murray is still involved in minor league baseball. I think he's an owner of a team. I think it's in Charleston. But I've heard tales of he shows up to these games and just hangs out like a regular fan. He just enjoys the sport, and I think that's so fun to see. Somebody just really delighting in something that a lot of us delight in, and how sports really have a way of bringing us together.
Yeah, and in his visit to Erie, it wasn't just for the cameras. He really mingled with the fans. The people, my friends that were there, were just delighted that he was so engaging. I guess after the game, he hung around at Andy's pub, playing pool with Mike Gallagher and just hanging out and having a good old time. So it wasn't just a photo op or, gee, I'm obligated to do this. It was something that he absolutely was happy to do. One of the favorite stories in the book, and one of the favorite people that I met, Bruce Bauman, who he sadly lost uh, several months ago. Bruce is one of those characters, one of the greatest raconteurs of the community, whether it's engaged in baseball talk or softball or just in general. What a storyteller. The jersey he's holding up, you'll see that the number 4 is not quite centered on the uniform like it normally would be, and there's a story behind that. Let's see, Warren Sweet was putting together a team, as the story goes, of players for a certain tournament game, and sometimes they would borrow uniforms from existing players to have a team that they fielded for that tournament. And at one point, as the story goes, one of my very favorite players and role models was a player named John Fetzner. And John was cousins with Mike and Pat Fetzner, who were also very good players. All three of them played on Carpet Town, one of the best teams I can ever remember. And that team would have been sponsored by Bruce and his family. Anyway, for the tournament, John was very proud of that uniform. He was a gritty player, very old school, and he didn't trust his number 4 just on anybody's back. So he was a little bit stubborn about wanting his uniform used by another player. So as a lark, and I suspect Bruce was behind it as well. Warren Sweet would have gone to the sports store and had them print up 15 jerseys with number 4, just in different directions. That way, when the next batter was called up every time, it would be, and now batting number 4, and then whatever the name is. But they had some fun with that. John was in the stands with his arms crossed the entire game. Is what I'm told, but I suspect in the brotherhood of the sport, it was probably appreciated.
You told another terrific story about Bruce and Jim Leland.
Oh yeah,
and the manager of the Tigers. I think, right?
Yeah, you can even tell from that picture. And this is in Bruce's later years, but you put a Tiger cap and a uniform on him, and he could pass as the manager at that time of the Tigers, Jim Leland. As a matter of fact, through his son Charlie, he had arranged that they would attend a spring training workout and game, and he had his picture taken with Jim Leland. They look like twins. And it got to the point, as I write about in the book, that one of the players, I believe it was Maglio Ordonez, I could be wrong, but he saw the two of them together and he could be heard hollering, "Dos Lelands, Dos Lelands." So they got a double dose of Jim Leland that day. Bruce played it to the hilt, I'm told. What a great guy. Yeah, one of my other favorite guys in the sports, one of the best baseball players in Erie history, was Eddie Heinrich. This particular watercolor was done by Kim Klecker, and it was gifted to me by my sister-in-law, Janet Galneck. And when I saw the picture, that she bought it for me because, of course, it's baseball oriented, and it's a Seawolves, and it's a beautiful portrait. It still hangs up in my wall here in the family room. But what Kim Klecker had done was taken a couple of photographs and used one of the current players. So I don't know who that is in the forefront, but I recognized instantly when I got this as a gift that looked like a photo of Eddie Heinrich that I had seen in doing some research. Eddie worked with us as a volunteer on Team Erie, and he was the nicest guy I've ever met. He reminded me so much of my dad. And what a ball player. He played in the Yankees system. He was another one of those guys that with his career interrupted by the war and then needing to find full-time employment, that would have truncated what could have been a really great career in the major leagues, but as it is, very successful in the pros and very, very successful playing for the Erie teams in the 40s. The whole theme of the watercolor is just as it's entitled by Kim, age to age. So she was trying to show a current player when, and in the shadows in the background is one of the old Erie Sailors player. I talked to Eddie Heinrich Jr. and he has the same copy of the same watercolor, and he was obviously very thrilled with it as well. I found the original photo, which is also in the book that's used for the watercolor from a newspaper clipping. So this one's special to me. It was a gift from my sister-in-law, but also it's a memory of one of the nicest guys and best ball players I've ever had the honor of knowing, and Ed Heinrich.
You know, the Heinrichs and Cuneos were great family friends, and all the kids knew each other. And Ed's wife, Mary, just an absolutely gem of a person. They also were excellent athletes, the Heinrich kids. But I remember Eddie saying at one point, as he was describing old Major League Baseball, you forget that there were so few teams compared to today.
That's
that there
true.
really wasn't a way, to easily advance when there were only at 8 teams in one league and 8 in another, or whatever it was.
Sure.
Through that period. And, I'm with you on that, Alan. The mention that you make of all these great people on Team Erie, though, tell us, if you wouldn't mind, what it was like with that effort, because as I recall it, the group Team Erie, a citizens group, it galvanized public opinion, which is almost unheard of. And that effort to save baseball in Erie was incredibly fast, involved all facets of the community, including Joyce Savacchio, the chairwoman of the Jefferson now, and political leaders, people like Jim Walzak, bankers like Ted Junker. Tell us what it was like leading that parade.
Yeah, it was like another job, but again, it was a labor of love. It was actually an article by your brother Kevin that speculated that under conditions with Ainsworth Field being what it was, that there was a risk of losing pro baseball in Erie. So I contacted him and said, can't we do something? If it's just a matter of maybe getting a new clubhouse built at the field or fixing the lights, we can raise some money. I got a quote from Clea Austin that was what I thought was a reasonable amount that we could target for putting up a clubhouse. A reasonable fundraising goal was set for $30,000. And we thought, yeah, we can do that. Well, after touching base with some of the professional baseball people and the executives and those in control of the minor leagues, they found that to be laughable. I didn't think it was funny, but they said, you're just wasting money. The requirements for minor league baseball at that time were daunting. The minimum seating capacity, the parking, the economics of it, the playing surface, you name it. It was daunting. But as we started to re-examine that, changing the goal from fixing Ainsworth to building a new ballpark, it became more realistic once, again, it's similar to the multiplier effect that I talked about with the book. And that is, if I talk to Kevin, then he introduced me to John McCormick. John introduced me to Ted Junker, and then Jeff Zumagale came on board. And then it was a multiplier effect of members of the Erie Boosters were there to help doing fundraisers. And my goodness, there was just so much of that team spirit early on. It didn't seem as daunting as it became. The leadership of Mayor Savacchio, Judy Lynch, of course, and our state representatives helped carry that forward. But a lot of that was fueled by the energy of the group, the Team Erie group, and people like Ted Junker and Ed Heinrich and John McCormick. My goodness, my position at that time was not to disappoint them. That was my main goal. So when it came to fundraising or going out and meeting with groups and having community meetings, I was more than willing to do that. But there was a real team around that. It was so gratifying to watch that grow over a 5-year period. So the original goal of $30,000, we ended up with a local match, 16 million for the complex at that time in '95. You want to hear something interesting about that is, do either of you guys remember what the local match was for getting the state money?
I don't remember the amount. I remember it included the parking garage.
That's right, the parking garage. It was the phone call from Whitey Cleaver at that time and said, you know, we were interested in building a parking garage, but we don't have quite the usage. If you had a ballpark quadra corner from there, that would get us over the hump. And for us, the state would accept that as the local match. So it was a magical moment. So.
Well, you know, for so many, it was a labor of love, but I always loved Betty Peebles, an old friend of ours, who just embraced that. She had been in baseball. You became close to Betty. That must have been fun.
Oh yeah, she was amazing. She was one of the first women sports writers to have a regular column nationally, and a lot of respect for her. Her husband Ray was a general manager of several teams after being a newspaper guy for many years, and she had a lot of friendships with people in pro baseball, and just a great reputation in the community. She was invaluable in terms of recruiting people like the Schembers. Mayor Schember's parents were part of the group that she helped recruit. Eddie Heinrich and, oh my gosh, so many others. John Gulick, Mary Schutzkoff, and of course the involvement with you and your brother Kevin was special. It became quite a team we had there.
Yeah. Well, tell us about this. Is this a Japanese baseball card?
Yeah, this is Nick Testa. Is one of the favorite ones that I researched. He grew up in the Bronx, and then bounced around minor league baseball for many years, including Erie. And after a mediocre career, I guess you could say, in the minors, he bounced around all over the world. I mean, he played in Korea and Holland and Venezuela, any place where he could find a job behind the plate or in the bullpen. And this is actually a photo of his Japanese baseball card from the Orions. And I don't know how I found it, but I was thrilled. So here's a guy that played in Erie, made it to the majors with the New York Giants for a cup of coffee. But then he ended up back in the Bronx, actually as the bullpen coach for the Yankees in their championship years in the late 90s. So he came full circle from the Bronx and through a very circuitous path through the entire world back to the Bronx, and found himself a really good team there, and a pit stop in Erie in between.
I thought this was a good example of your own bona fides. Your research on Erie Sailors players is the best I've ever seen. And tell us about that a little bit. I know it's not central to the book, but you really are a historian. And how have you tracked that over the years?
Yeah, I grew up a Yankee fan, and I still am, but I'm kind of a Tigers fan by extension now, by just following some of the players that have come up through Erie. And of course, they had previously had farm teams in the systems for the Minnesota Twins and the Pittsburgh Pirates and the Angels, for a short time, the New York Giants back in the day. And for any player that stopped in Erie, um, I really, just as kind of a hobby, enjoyed collecting their baseball cards. There's hundreds of them. Some have just like Nick Testa been up for a cup of coffee, and some of them like Justin Verlander or Fernando Rodney or Aramis Ramirez, Nick Castellanos, Eugenio Suarez. There's so many stars, but just a lot of guys that pass through on their journeys through professional baseball. And I have a tip of the cap for them, as well as the guys from Erie that made it in pro ball. There's a number of them that I researched, and some of them I was able to connect with. It was a joy. Sam Jethro is somebody that started in the Negro Leagues and then eventually made it to the major leagues in his 30s. Was the rookie of the year for the Milwaukee Braves, and what a great player. He probably, let's see, I know he led the league in stolen bases as a rookie, but he was a great hitter. I remember seeing him pitching in the Glenwood League at the end of his career, and it was a thrill for me to see him, an ex-big leaguer that had matriculated to live in Erie after his major league career and be so instrumental in the Glenwood League. So there's a lot of stories in the book about the Glenwood League, but none are more precious to me than being able to write about Satchel Paige and Sam Jethro and Curtis Granderson, who you see the image of them on the wonderful work that's done. Tommy Ferraro had installed that a few months ago.
Yeah, tell us more about this Erie's role in Negro League baseball.
Yeah, a lot of
pretty storied as well. Yeah, and this is second in Cherry, right? Bayview now.
At Bayview Park, which is one of my favorite places to watch games back in the day. What a treat! Beautiful vista. As I recall, they had a very tall left field fence because of the distance, but other than that, I loved it. I was sidetracking myself there. I'm sorry, but anyway, a lot of players that had played in the Negro Leagues in Cleveland and Kansas City had matriculated to Erie. I believe the Pope family was involved with that as far as owning the team, and then participated in the Glenwood League, and Willie Grace, Hardin, Jimmy Williams is a friend of mine. His dad, Jake, played on, there it is, played on the Pontiacs as well. Jimmy's a guy that I've gotten to know through the Erie Codgers. It's a league that still plays, 50 years and older. It's a league that meets several times a week during the summer and play the game of ball, kind of modified a bit, but Jimmy's a character himself. He always greets me with a smile, a kind word, and a line drive to left center. But his dad was an infielder on one of Pontiac's teams, and another part of a lot of admiration for players that kicked around in the Negro Leagues and the minor leagues and eventually made their mark on the game, locally and nationally. It's a lot to be proud of there.
Alan, Pat mentioned the depth of your research and the skill of your research. There's so much to unpack with this book, and I know we're not going to get to all of it in this conversation here. And I hope people pick up a copy of it if they haven't already, and hope to have you back to talk about more. But I'm curious here, what surprised you once you got into researching this? What was there one thing that stands out the most that you didn't anticipate coming across, or really grabbed your attention because it was new to you, or shed new light on something you had already known about? What surprised you in the research process for unpacking this book?
Well, the biggest surprise was probably the accessibility of people and their openness and and willingness to share personal things. It's one thing to read something and do some digging at the library, and then it's another to say, gee, maybe I can reach out to this guy. I'm reaching out to people that have no idea who I am, or what I'm trying to do for, in this case with Jimmy, and able to share memories of his dad playing on the Pontiacs, and here it's somebody that's still playing ball. It was awesome. So the surprising thing was just being able to make that leap from reading about something to actually firsthand meeting somebody that is a relation or has more to share. I think that was serendipitous, but it's also something that was kind of a common theme. I was very lucky in a number of cases to make some connections that I thought I would be reading about somebody, and here I am actually talking to them. One of my favorites is also Lucille Sitzler, who I had met at the Heritage Room in the library, and I'd gotten to know through other friends. I found out that she was interested in researching women's softball and baseball from the 40s. And we were able to kind of compare notes a little bit. And I tell her story in the book as well, where Lucille was quite a good player. And even though women weren't perceived at that time as ball players, she proved them wrong. And she's a great athlete in her own right. But again, the surprise was being able to make that connection personally, not just in looking at what's in print.
Alan, what would you say was the most challenging thing for you in trying to write this? Was it the enormity? Was it trying to take all of the stories and shape some sort of narrative? Was it the start and stop? Was it people just showing up with way too many 40, 50, 60-year-old catcher's mitts for you to look at? What was the most challenging part of doing all of this?
Yeah, there can never be too much of that stuff like that. The challenging thing was twofold. One was my own health. I had to retire earlier than I wanted to from Gannon, and there's a reason that was necessary. And sometimes that would come up and haunt me, so to speak, slow me down. I would be productive for a couple of weeks and then non-productive for a couple of weeks. It's just slowed down the process. I had to listen to my body. So that was something that was difficult, but I found it to be very therapeutic. By working through it, it actually helped me. And the other thing is the situation with the COVID-19, not being able to sit across from a person, share a coffee or a beer, or look over a scrapbook together. It's hard to replace that virtually, but it is what it is. Fortunately, I was able to do, since it was such a long project, I was able to do a whole lot of in-person interaction before things were shut down.
Well, the results are terrific. And I have to, before we break here, I wanted to ask you about the family, your family that appears throughout this book. It's such a personal and really compelling part of it. And your brother, your dad, more than one brother, tell us about those experiences and how they contributed to your appreciation for sports.
Oh yeah, absolutely. My dad was my hero. He actually had professional aspirations. He had scouts visiting in his hometown of Reynoldsville to see him play first base and smash the baseball, but World War II interfered, and he spent time at Iwo Jima instead of playing ball. But when I did see him play in industrial leagues and city rec type of ball, he was a hero. And the guys he played with, Walt Litz and Stan Rocky, and oh my gosh, these guys were bigger than life. So I try to capture that a little bit in the photo. My brother Larry was a hero as well. We lost him to a heart problem much too young, but he actually was an inspiration to me. I tell his story in the book. We almost lost him several years ago He actually had a heart attack while on the playing field, playing ball with the Codgers, and was resuscitated by several people in attendance, opposing players. Paul Prispersky was one of the people that actually saved his life, and he was able to go on then and watch his girls grow up, and that was that's larger than life right there. That really hit home, and I tell that story. My brother Leo is a master of putting together baseball bats that needed repaired, or getting a ball glove oiled up and ready for use. So I tell the story about him mastering that craft and taking one bat in particular he had found. Gosh, this is early 60s. It was a Jackie Robinson model, probably 1962, and it was cracked in half, and he was able to use whatever magic he had, hardware, duct tape, you name it. That thing is still a beast. I mean, it must be 40 ounces, but it's a beast of a club, and it didn't do me much good because I couldn't swing the bat to save my life. But for somebody that could actually use it, it was quite the weapon. It still is. It's still sitting in his garage waiting for use. That thing was repaired to last. So I tell that story as well. I had a lot of fun with it.
So, Alan, as we're almost out of time, I'd be remiss if we didn't revisit who you asked us to come back to, which was the fourth B in Dave Barry. As I'm going to pull down the presentation so folks can see us in the end, and we can see the cover of the book and tell us. But I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you to tell us the Dave Barry story here at the end.
Yeah, during the height of action with Team Erie, and also with the ballpark making progress. At that same time, the Florida Marlins were fielding their first professional team. Before they got started playing pro ball in Miami, they fielded a single A team in Erie, the Erie Sailors. And part of that coverage was we were getting calls from people in Florida. I drew the short straw, and I had the chance to Dan Levitard. I did an interview with him, which was fine. I felt he was big timing me a little bit. He didn't care about the ballpark. He just wanted to know how excited we were about the Marlins, and it was okay. But at the same time, Kevin Cuneo had the right straw, and he got to interview Dave Barry, who actually visited Erie, hang out at Hector's and a few other places. Patrick, you were part of that at one point, right?
I was, but I can tell no secrets.
Okay, fair enough. But yeah, there's a little bit of Dave Barry in the book as well. You can read about that as well. He is a favorite of mine. So it was, I always resented Kevin for doing that part of it. And I got Levitard.
Yeah.
Worst could happen, I suppose. All right, toughest question at the end, as we're almost out of time here. Alan, at the baseball field for you, is it peanuts or Cracker Jacks?
Oh gosh, is that a binary?
It could be nachos, it could be hot dogs. You could fill in anything. Just a good baseball joke there, right at the end, at the bottom of the ninth, taking us home for the end of this program.
Yeah, Cracker Jacks would have to rule though. But I love getting a hot dog at the ballpark and a beer and just settling in. There's nothing finer.
Mr. Alan Swigonski, author of Erie Baseball and Softball 360. So many stories. We only got to a fraction of them, but thank you for your time, energy, and effort on this research, this book, and sharing it with us here in conversation for Jefferson Educational Society Digital Program. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, and a big thanks to folks tuning in, whether you're watching live on the JES Facebook page or you're watching or listening to a later broadcast of this. We thank you for partaking in the program. Alan, before we do sign off, for folks looking to connect with you, find out more about your book, can you hold it up? Can we see the cover again? Where do we point them for more information on this book?
Fair enough. But yeah, this is it. You'll find it at Werner Books in Liberty Plaza. lot of good things going on at Liberty Plaza, and Werner's does a great job of handling the sales for me. They actually are kind enough under current circumstances, they'll mail out a copy if that's more convenient for you. But they've been wonderful to work with. Werner Books.
Wonderful. And I'll echo a comment from our comment section. Such amazing stories. Thank you again, Alan Swigonski. Thank you. And a big thanks to my colleague, Mr. Pat Cuneo, for joining in this program, having this conversation, bringing your knowledge, expertise, your experience, and sharing that with us here. We appreciate that, Pat.
Thank you, Thomas.
And of course, folks, for more information about both upcoming JES programs as well as past discussions available now for on-demand streaming, head over to our website, jeserie.org. There you'll also find a wide range of publications, from timely reads on current topics to reports, essays, and more, including a report by none other than Alan Swigonsky on minor league baseball in Erie, Pennsylvania. You'll find that at jeserie.org. And of course, be sure to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. For the Jefferson Educational Society, I'm Ben Speggen. Be safe, be sound, and thanks for listening and learning with us.